My daughter-in-law told me to leave. She didn't know my son was behind her. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, it is free, and it is the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic and emotional stories like this one. Your support truly means the world to us. Thank you very much. Now, let us go back to our main character. Get your coat and leave, Maggie. Daniel doesn't want you here either. Claire Bennet's voice cut across the dining room with such cold certainty that Margaret Bennett stopped with one hand resting on the back of a chair. For a moment, the only sound inside the quiet suburban home was the faint ticking of the clock above the kitchen doorway. Maggie looked at her daughter-in-law, then slowly toward the hallway behind her. Claire didn't notice. She couldn't see the man standing there, motionless in the shadows near the staircase. Daniel Bennett had returned from his phone call less than 30 seconds earlier, and his wife had no idea he was listening. Maggie did. Her eyes met her son's for the briefest moment. Surprise flashed across Daniel's face, followed by confusion. He started to step forward, but Maggie gave him the smallest shake of her head. Wait. Daniel stopped. Claire folded her arms. At 34, she carried herself with polished confidence, the kind that made every sentence sound settled before anyone else had a chance to answer. I don't want another argument, she said. Maggie's expression remained composed. At 62, she had learned that silence could reveal more about a person than confrontation ever would. I wasn't arguing with you, Claire. That's exactly the problem. You never think you're doing anything. Maggie glanced at the dining table. 20 minutes earlier, 4 plates had been arranged there for what Daniel had called a simple family dinner. Maggie had arrived carrying Emily's favorite apple pie from a bakery 12 miles across town. She had expected laughter from her 8-year-old granddaughter, coffee after dinner, maybe Daniel telling one of those childhood stories Claire always pretended she'd heard too many times. Instead, Emily had gone upstairs to finish homework, Daniel had stepped outside to take a work call, and something in Claire had changed the moment the front door closed behind him. Her smile disappeared first. Then the warmth in her voice. Now Maggie's purse sat beside the front door, placed there by Claire without permission. Her coat had been folded over the entryway bench like a message that required no explanation. Daniel invited me tonight, Maggie said quietly. Daniel invites you because he feels obligated. In the hallway, Daniel's brow tightened. Maggie saw it. Claire didn't. Did he tell you that? Maggie asked. Claire gave a short, humorless laugh. You really think he tells you everything? The words landed harder than Claire seemed to realize. Maggie didn't defend herself. She simply studied the woman standing across from her. There had been tension before, certainly. A cancelled Sunday brunch here. A clipped answer there. Small moments easy to excuse because families were complicated and marriages needed room to breathe. Maggie had deliberately given Daniel and Claire that room. She never arrived without calling. She never questioned how they raised Emily. She never demanded holidays or weekends. Yet tonight Claire spoke as though Maggie had been forcing open a door that had always been locked. If Daniel needs more space, Maggie said, he can tell me himself. That's what you don't understand. Claire stepped closer, lowering her voice even though she believed they were alone. He can't tell you because you make him feel guilty. Daniel's face changed. The confusion disappeared. Maggie noticed his hand slowly lower from the phone he was still holding. Claire, Maggie said, almost gently, be careful about speaking for someone who isn't in the room. Claire glanced toward the patio doors, apparently assuming Daniel was still outside. Then she looked back at Maggie. I'm his wife. I know what he wants. Maggie's gaze moved once more toward the hallway. Daniel was still there, barely 15 feet away. This time he didn't move at all. He was listening now. Really listening. Claire reached toward the entryway bench, lifted Maggie's coat, and held it out to her. So I'm saying what Daniel doesn't have the courage to say. This is our home. Our family. And you need to stop acting like you belong in the middle of it. Maggie looked at the coat but didn't take it. Something painful passed through her eyes, then vanished beneath the calm she had carried through far harder years than this one evening. Behind Claire, Daniel stared at his wife as though he were hearing a stranger use his voice. Maggie could have ended it instantly, for words would have been enough. Your husband is behind you. Instead, she looked directly at her son and remained silent. Daniel understood. Claire wanted to speak for him. Maggie was going to let her finish. Claire kept the coat extended for another second, waiting for Maggie to accept it. Maggie did not. Instead, she looked at the dining table again, at the 4 place settings and the small glass of milk Emily had left beside her plate before going upstairs. 20 minutes earlier, Claire had been smiling. She had complimented Maggie's sweater, asked about traffic, even thanked her for bringing dessert. But the warmth had felt practiced, like a porch light switched on for company and turned off the moment nobody important was watching. Maggie had noticed little things for months. Claire answering questions meant for Daniel. Claire changing Sunday plans at the last minute. Claire becoming unusually quiet whenever Daniel mentioned taking his mother to lunch. None of it had seemed large enough to confront. Maggie had spent years learning not to mistake every closed door for rejection. I have never asked Daniel to choose between us, Maggie said. Claire lowered the coat. You do not have to ask. You know exactly what you are doing. Behind her, Daniel remained still. His eyes stayed fixed on his wife. And what exactly am I doing? Maggie asked. Claire exhaled as though she had been waiting years for permission to answer. You call him whenever something goes wrong. You bring up stories from when he was a kid. You make every holiday about traditions you had before I was here. Then everyone acts like I am unreasonable if I want something that belongs to us. Maggie listened without interrupting. Some of what Claire described was recognizable. Maggie did call Daniel sometimes, although usually after he called her first. She did tell childhood stories because Emily loved hearing them. She did make the same cinnamon rolls every Christmas morning because Daniel had asked her not to stop. But Claire was taking ordinary pieces of family history and arranging them into evidence of something Maggie had never intended. If I have made you feel excluded, Maggie said, you could have told me. Claire gave another quiet laugh. And then what? You would tell Daniel you were hurt, he would defend you, and I would become the terrible daughter-in-law again. Maggie's face tightened slightly. I have never called you that. You do not need to. Claire placed the coat back on the bench. You have history with him. I get it. You raised him. You struggled. You were there first. Everyone knows the story. The words carried a bitterness Maggie had never heard so clearly. For years, she had believed giving the young couple space was an act of respect. After Daniel married Claire, Maggie stopped using the spare key he had given her. She called before visiting. When Emily was born, Maggie waited to be asked before coming over, even when every instinct in her wanted to help. She remembered standing in her own kitchen one Sunday afternoon with a casserole cooling on the counter because Claire had cancelled dinner at the last minute. Maggie had simply wrapped it and put it in the freezer. No complaint. No guilt. No scorekeeping. I thought I was respecting your marriage, Maggie said. Claire shook her head. You thought being quiet made it impossible for anyone to criticize you. That sentence reached Daniel differently. Maggie saw it in his eyes. He knew his mother well enough to understand what her quietness had cost her. After his father died, Maggie had worked long weeks managing the front office of a dental practice while taking bookkeeping jobs from home at night. She never presented those years as sacrifice. To Daniel, they were simply the years when his mother somehow kept the lights on, groceries in the refrigerator, and his college applications moving forward. Claire stepped nearer to Maggie. Daniel has his own life now. I know. Then let him live it. Maggie's voice stayed even. I have. Claire stared at her, frustrated by the absence of a fight. No. You stay close enough that he always feels responsible for you. Behind her, Daniel's jaw tightened. Maggie could see how badly he wanted to speak, but she held his gaze for one quiet second. Not yet. She needed to know whether Claire was angry with her or whether something deeper had been growing beneath this family for years. Did Daniel tell you he feels responsible for me? Maggie asked. Claire hesitated. It lasted barely a heartbeat, But Maggie caught it. So did Daniel. Then Claire lifted her chin. He told me more than you think. Maggie felt the room change. It was no longer about awkward holidays or competing traditions. Claire was claiming private conversations with Daniel as proof, and the man whose words she was borrowing was standing less than 15 feet behind her. Maggie folded her hands calmly in front of her. Then tell me what my son said. Exactly. Claire did not answer immediately. The confidence in her face remained, but something behind it shifted. Maggie saw it clearly now. This was no longer a daughter-in-law describing frustration. Claire was deciding how far she was willing to go. You want his exact words? Claire asked. Yes, Maggie said. If Daniel has been telling you that I am a burden, I would rather hear the truth than keep making the same mistake. In the hallway, Daniel looked down for a moment, then back at his mother. There was pain in his expression now, but Maggie did not rescue him from it. Claire had chosen to speak for him. She would have to own every word. Fine, Claire said. He said he is exhausted. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Exhausted by what? Maggie asked. By feeling like he has to take care of you. Maggie remained still. When did he say that? Does the date matter? If you are telling me something my son said about me, yes. Details matter. Claire looked toward the kitchen and then back at Maggie. A few weeks ago. After you called about your car. Maggie remembered the call immediately. Her battery had died in a grocery store parking lot about 3 miles from home. She had called roadside assistance first. Daniel happened to call while she was waiting, heard where she was, and insisted on coming over. Maggie had told him twice that he did not need to. He came anyway, carrying coffee and joking that she had ruined his excuse to avoid errands. Daniel called me that day, Maggie said. I did not ask him to come. Claire's expression hardened. That is what you always say. You never ask. You just make sure he knows enough to feel guilty. Daniel shifted his weight behind her. The floor gave the faintest creak. Claire paused and glanced toward the hallway. Maggie's heart tightened. For 1 second, it seemed the moment had arrived. But Claire saw nothing beyond the edge of the wall and turned back. Daniel remained hidden. What else did he say? Maggie asked. Claire stared at her. He said every time the phone rings, he wonders what you need now. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Maggie felt the sentence settle inside her, not because she believed it, but because Claire had delivered it so easily. There was no hesitation anymore. Anything else? Maggie asked. He said he wishes you would build a life that does not revolve around him. That one almost made Maggie smile, though there was nothing funny about it. She had friends. She volunteered twice a month at the county library. She played cards with 3 women she had known for 20 years. She took a pottery class on Thursday evenings and had recently started planning a fall trip to Vermont with her sister. Daniel knew all of that. Claire knew some of it too. This was not misunderstanding anymore. It was invention. That does not sound like Daniel, Maggie said. Claire stepped closer. Maybe because you only know the version of Daniel who is afraid to disappoint you. Behind Claire, Daniel's expression went completely still. Maggie recognized that stillness. He had worn it as a teenager whenever he discovered someone had lied to him. He was not confused anymore. He was listening to his wife manufacture a version of him in real time. He loves you, Claire continued, but love does not mean he wants you involved in everything. I have never asked to be involved in everything. You do not understand what it is like being married to someone whose mother is always part of the conversation. Maggie absorbed that carefully. For the first time, something beneath Claire's cruelty sounded almost honest. Jealousy. Resentment. Perhaps loneliness. Those feelings could have been discussed. They could have been understood. But Claire had buried them beneath borrowed words and false claims. If you felt pushed aside, Maggie said, you should have told me that. You did not need to put words in Daniel's mouth. Claire's cheeks flushed. I am not putting words in his mouth. Then you should have no trouble saying exactly what he told you. Claire lifted her chin. He said he only invites you because he feels sorry for you. Silence filled the room. Even the clock seemed louder. Maggie looked past Claire. Daniel's face had lost all softness. Claire mistook Maggie's silence for injury and pressed forward. I know that hurts, but maybe you needed to hear it. Maggie took a slow breath. Did he really say that? More times than you know. Daniel took one quiet step forward. Maggie saw him and gave the smallest shake of her head. Not yet. Claire had finally stopped describing her feelings and started building her case on lies. Maggie needed to know where those lies ended. All right, she said softly. Then keep going. Tell me everything my son supposedly said about me. Claire studied Maggie for a long moment, almost as if she were trying to decide whether the invitation was a trap. Then her shoulders relaxed. She had mistaken Maggie's calm for surrender. You really want everything? She asked. Everything you believe I should know, Maggie replied. Claire set the coat down again and folded her arms. Daniel said he cannot keep organizing his life around you. He said every holiday turns into a negotiation because he has to worry about whether you will feel left out. He said he wants weekends where he does not have to check whether you already made plans for us. Maggie listened carefully. Behind Claire, Daniel stood completely still. The distance between them was barely 15 feet, yet Claire spoke as though her husband were miles away. Last Thanksgiving was your idea, Maggie said. You invited me. Daniel insisted. And Christmas morning? He insisted then too. Maggie nodded slowly. So Daniel wanted me there. Claire's mouth tightened. Because he feels guilty. You keep saying that word. Because it is true. Maggie looked past her again. Daniel's eyes met hers. This time there was something different in them. Not only anger. Hurt. He was hearing his marriage described through conversations that had never happened, watching his wife turn his affection for his mother into evidence against her. His phone remained in his hand, forgotten. He had come inside expecting to return to dinner. Instead, he had walked into a version of his own life he did not recognize. Claire continued. Do you know how many times we have changed plans because of you? Tell me. Your birthday dinner last year. Maggie remembered it immediately. Daniel had reserved a table at a small Italian restaurant downtown. Claire had arrived 40 minutes late because of work, apologized, and spent most of dinner answering messages. Maggie had never complained. Daniel planned that dinner, Maggie said. For your birthday, Claire replied. Exactly. Claire exhaled sharply. You always have an answer. No. I have a memory. The words were quiet, but they stopped Claire for half a second. Daniel lowered his gaze, almost hiding a reaction. Maggie continued before Claire could redirect the conversation. If you are angry because Daniel includes me in his life, then say that. But do not tell me he resents doing things he chose to do. Claire's face hardened. You think you know him better than I do because you raised him. I did not say that. You do not have to say things, Maggie. That is your specialty. You stand there looking calm while everyone else feels like the villain. Maggie felt the accusation more deeply than she expected. She had spent years making herself smaller around Daniel's marriage precisely because she never wanted Claire to feel challenged. When Daniel and Claire bought this house, Maggie had waited nearly a month before asking to visit, even though Daniel had offered to show it to her the day they received the keys. When Emily was born, Maggie had stayed at a hotel 2 miles away rather than assume she could sleep in their guest room. She had learned to ask before helping, before visiting, before bringing dinner. She had thought boundaries were doors people agreed how to open. Claire seemed to have experienced them as walls Maggie was somehow still crossing. Maybe I have made mistakes, Maggie said. If I have, I will own them. But I will not own things I did not do. Claire gave a thin smile. There it is. Saint Maggie. Daniel's expression changed instantly. Maggie saw his foot move forward. She looked at him again and held his gaze. Wait. Daniel stopped, but this time reluctantly. Claire noticed none of it. She turned toward the dining table and picked up Maggie's purse, carrying it to the entryway beside the coat. The gesture was deliberate now. Final. I am trying to protect my marriage, Claire said. From me. From the hold you have on him. Maggie's voice softened. Daniel is not something either of us gets to own. Claire looked back sharply. I am his wife. And I am his mother. Those are different relationships. They should never have been competing. For the first time, Claire had no immediate answer. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked faintly, reminding Maggie that Emily was somewhere above them, unaware that the adults downstairs were pulling years of resentment into the open. Maggie lowered her voice. Whatever you feel about me, we are not doing this loudly enough for Emily to hear. Claire's expression flickered, but only briefly. Then make this easy. Take your things and go. Maggie looked at her coat, then at Claire. And what will you tell Daniel when he comes back? Claire answered without hesitation. I will tell him you decided to leave early. Behind her, Daniel's face went still. Maggie felt the final piece fall into place. This was not simply resentment. Claire was prepared to rewrite what happened after Maggie walked out the door. And if he asks why? Maggie said. Claire reached for the coat one more time. He will not. Because deep down, Daniel wants exactly what I want. He just does not have the courage to tell you himself. Maggie looked directly over Claire's shoulder. Daniel was no longer standing in shadow. He had moved close enough that one more step would bring him fully into the dining room. Maggie met his eyes and gave no signal this time. She simply turned back to Claire and asked, Are you absolutely certain you want those to be your words? Yes, Claire said. I am absolutely certain. Maggie held her gaze, searching for even the smallest sign that Claire understood the weight of what she had just claimed. There was none. Claire lifted the coat from the bench and placed it across Maggie's forearms. This time Maggie accepted it, not because she agreed to leave, but because she suddenly understood that Claire needed to believe she had one. You know what is strange? Maggie said quietly. I spent years worrying that I might become exactly what you seem to think I am. Claire frowned. What does that mean? Maggie ran one hand over the sleeve of her coat. After Daniel married you, I promised myself I would never make him feel that loving his wife meant abandoning his mother. I promised myself I would never compete with you. Yet here we are. Yes, Maggie said. Here we are. Her mind drifted back 14 years, to a kitchen much smaller than this one. Daniel had been 23 then, newly graduated, working an entry-level job and trying desperately to prove he could build a life without asking his mother for help. Maggie had found him sitting at her old kitchen table one evening with overdue notices spread beside a cup of cold coffee. His father had been gone for several years. Maggie was still learning how to carry grief without letting Daniel carry it for her. He needed money for a professional certification that could open the door to a better job, but he refused to ask. Maggie had gone upstairs that night and opened a small wooden jewelry box. Inside was her wedding ring. She had kept it untouched since her husband's death, believing she would never part with it. 2 days later, the ring was gone, and Daniel's certification fee was paid. She told him the money had come from savings. He never knew the truth. Claire never knew either. Maggie had never mentioned it because love offered as evidence stopped feeling like love. She had not helped her son, so he would owe her a lifetime of loyalty. She had helped him because he was her son. Now, standing in his dining room with her coat in her arms, Maggie wondered how something given so freely could have been transformed into an accusation of control. Daniel is not responsible for my happiness, Maggie said. I have never wanted him to be. Claire shook her head. Maybe you believe that. I know it. Then prove it. Claire pointed toward the front door. Go home tonight. Stop calling for a while. Give us space without making Daniel feel like he has to apologize for it. Behind Claire, Daniel's eyes flashed with disbelief. Maggie could see the effort it took for him to remain silent. How long? Maggie asked. Claire seemed surprised. What? How long would satisfy you? A week? A month? 6 months? Claire hesitated. I do not know. Then this is not about space. Maggie's voice remained gentle. It is about removing me. Do not twist my words. I am asking you to define them. Claire's frustration returned. Fine. Maybe we need a few months. Maybe Daniel needs to experience what life feels like when he is not constantly worried about you. Daniel took another step forward, but Claire still could not see him. Maggie could. His face carried a question now, One Maggie could answer simply by speaking his name. She chose not to. Claire needed one final opportunity to tell the truth. "Did Daniel ask you to say this to me tonight?" Maggie asked. Claire paused. The silence lasted longer this time. "We have talked about it." "That was not my question." Claire's eyes narrowed. "He wants boundaries." "Did he ask you to tell me to leave?" Maggie repeated. Claire drew a breath. "He said he would be happier if you stopped being part of our lives for a while." Daniel's expression changed completely. Maggie felt something inside her sink, not because she believed Claire, but because there was no longer any uncertainty about what was happening. "Those were his words?" she asked. "Yes. He said he would be happier without me in his life." "Yes, Maggie." Claire stepped closer, her voice dropping into something almost sympathetic. "I know that is painful, but you need to accept that your son has grown up. He has a wife. He has a daughter. This is his family now." Maggie looked toward the staircase. Somewhere upstairs, Emily was still doing homework. Family. The word should have made the room warmer. Instead, Claire had sharpened it into a boundary line. "And I am outside that family?" Maggie asked. Claire did not answer immediately. Then she reached for Maggie's purse and handed it to her. "I think it would be better for everyone if you stopped trying to stand in the middle of it." Maggie took the purse. Her fingers closed around the strap. Behind Claire, Daniel stepped fully to the edge of the dining room entrance. He was visible now, if Claire had only turned her head. She did not. Maggie met his eyes. There was no need to hold him back anymore. Claire had been given every chance. Still, Maggie asked one final question. "If Daniel walked through that door right now, would you say every one of these things in front of him?" Claire gave a confident nod. "Of course I would." Maggie's eyes stayed fixed just beyond her shoulder. "Then perhaps you should." Claire followed Maggie's gaze for half a second, but not far enough to see Daniel standing just beyond the dining room entrance. "Perhaps I should what?" she asked. Maggie adjusted the purse strap over her shoulder and held her coat against her chest. "Say those words to Daniel yourself." Claire's expression tightened. "I already have." Behind her, Daniel stared at the woman he had been married to for 11 years. Maggie could almost see the questions forming behind his eyes. Had Claire truly believed any of this? Had she been carrying this resentment for months? Years? Or had tonight simply given her permission to say whatever would make Maggie disappear? "Then there should be no problem repeating them," Maggie said. Claire gave a tired sigh. "This is exactly what I mean. Everything becomes a test with you." "No. Tonight, I am trying very hard not to make this one." Claire stepped toward the front door and opened it. Cool evening air slipped into the entryway. Porch light spilled across the hardwood floor. "Then let us stop talking. Please leave before Daniel comes back." Maggie did not move. "Why before he comes back?" "Because I do not want another emotional scene." Daniel's eyebrows lifted slightly. Maggie noticed. "What scene are you expecting?" she asked. "You getting upset?" Daniel feeling guilty. "Me becoming the bad person because I finally said what needed to be said." Maggie looked at the open doorway. Her car sat along the curb beneath a maple tree, barely 30 yards away. Leaving would have been easy. She could have walked outside, driven home, and allowed Claire to tell Daniel whatever version of the evening suited her. A younger Maggie might have done exactly that. She had spent much of her life believing dignity meant absorbing pain quietly so everyone else could remain comfortable. Age had taught her something different. Silence could be dignified, but only when it was chosen. Silence forced by someone else's dishonesty was something else entirely. "Close the door, Claire," Maggie said. "I am not staying for dinner, but we are going to finish this conversation properly." Claire stared at her. "This is my house." "Yes." Maggie's answer was immediate. "And I have respected that from the day you moved in. That is why I am asking rather than demanding." Claire slowly closed the door. "Fine. What else could you possibly need to hear?" Maggie glanced toward Daniel. He had not moved. "I need to understand why you needed Daniel to be the villain in a conversation he was not part of." Claire's face changed. "Excuse me? If you wanted me here less often, you could have told me that. If you felt I was interfering, you could have said so. Instead, you told me Daniel was tired of me. You told me he invited me out of pity. You told me he would be happier if I disappeared from his life. Claire's voice sharpened. Because those things are true. Then why are you afraid to have this conversation while he is here? I am not afraid. Good. Maggie's tone remained almost gentle. Then there is nothing left to protect. Claire looked toward the patio doors again. She still believed Daniel was outside. You really want him dragged into this? You dragged him into it when you started speaking for him. That landed. Claire looked away. For the first time all evening, confidence deserted her face for more than a second. Maggie saw something underneath it that was not cruelty. Fear. Claire was afraid of losing something, although she had chosen the worst possible way to protect it. I am his wife, Claire said more quietly. Sometimes I feel like I have spent 11 years sharing him with a history I can never compete with. Maggie's expression softened. There it was. The truth, finally, or at least part of it. You were never supposed to compete with his history. Easy for you to say. No, Claire. It is not. Maggie paused. I lost my husband. Daniel lost his father. We survived those years together. That history exists. But it does not threaten your marriage unless someone turns it into a competition. Claire looked down. For one fragile moment, Maggie thought the anger might finally break open into honesty. Then Claire lifted her head and hardened again. You always know how to make yourself sound reasonable. I am not asking to sound reasonable. I am asking you to stop using my son's name to say things you want to say. Claire's lips pressed together. Daniel agrees with me. Maggie waited. Claire took the silence as permission to continue. He told me last week that sometimes he wishes he could have 1 year where he did not have to worry about you at all. Behind her, Daniel's eyes widened. Claire continued, unaware. He said he would be happier if you simply stepped away. Those were his words. Maggie's heart sank at the ease of the lie. She looked directly at Daniel. This time, she did not shake her head. She did not ask him to wait. Claire picked up Maggie's purse strap where it had slipped from her shoulder and handed it back with a final, dismissive calm. So please have enough dignity to leave before he comes back. The room went silent. Then a man's voice came from directly behind her. You do not have to wait for me, Claire. I am already here. Claire froze. Her fingers remained wrapped around the edge of Maggie's coat for one long second before slowly letting go. The color drained from her face as she turned toward the dining room entrance. Daniel stood there with his phone at his side, his expression so controlled that it frightened her more than anger would have. Daniel, Claire whispered. How long have you been standing there? Daniel did not answer immediately. He looked at Maggie first. His mother stood near the front door with her purse over one shoulder and her coat folded against her chest, looking less like someone who had been asked to dinner and more like someone who had been carefully removed from it. Then Daniel looked back at his wife. Long enough. Claire swallowed. Long enough for what? Long enough to hear you tell my mother what I supposedly said. The room seemed to shrink around those words. Claire opened her mouth, but Daniel continued. I heard you say I invite her because I feel sorry for her. I heard you say I am exhausted by her. I heard you say I would be happier if she stopped being part of my life. Claire shook her head quickly. You did not hear the whole conversation. Daniel's eyes stayed on hers. Then explain the part one heard myself. Claire looked toward Maggie as though searching for the source of the disaster. She pushed me into saying things badly. Maggie said nothing. Daniel noticed. Do not do that, he said. Do not make Mom responsible for words that came out of your mouth. Claire drew a breath. Daniel, we have talked about boundaries. Yes. We have. Hope flashed across Claire's face. Exactly. We talked about making sure we have enough time for ourselves. We talked about planning holidays better. We talked about communicating before making commitments. His voice remained level. We never talked about removing my mother from our lives. Claire's hope disappeared. Daniel stepped into the dining room. And I never said I invite her because I pity her. Maybe not in those exact words. Not in any words. Claire looked away. You have complained before. I complained once because I was tired after work and had too much on my schedule. I also complained about traffic that day. That did not mean I wanted the highway removed. Maggie almost smiled, but the sadness in Daniel's face stopped her. Claire folded her arms again, though the gesture no longer looked confident. It looked defensive. You do not understand what it feels like from my side. Then tell me your side, Daniel said. Your side. Not mine. Claire stared at him. Daniel waited. The clock above the kitchen doorway marked another second. Then another. I feel like she is always here, Claire finally said. Maggie's eyes lowered. Daniel glanced at his mother. Mom comes here maybe twice a month. It is not just physically being here, Claire replied. It is the calls, the stories, the traditions, the way you light up whenever she talks about when you were young. Sometimes I feel like there is this entire part of you that I can never reach because she already owns it. Daniel's expression softened slightly, but not enough to erase what he had heard. Claire, she does not own my past. She was part of it. That is easy for you to say. And you are part of my present. You are my wife. Those things were never supposed to cancel each other out. Claire's eyes filled with frustration. But I am always the one expected to understand. Maggie finally spoke. I would have listened if you had told me. Claire turned toward her. Would you? Yes. And then you would have told Daniel. Not if you asked me not to. Claire laughed once, but there was no humor in it. Of course you would say that now. Daniel's voice sharpened. Claire. She stopped. Mom is standing by the door with her coat because you told her I wanted her gone. That was not a misunderstanding. You used my name to make something cruel sound official. Claire blinked rapidly. I was trying to protect our marriage. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. By lying to my mother about me? Claire had no answer. Daniel's voice dropped. You told her I would be happier without her. Do you understand what that sentence could have done if I had not walked back inside? Claire's gaze fell to the floor. Maggie felt the question more deeply than anything else said that night. Had Daniel returned 5 minutes later, she might have driven home believing her son secretly wanted freedom from her. She might have stopped calling, stopped visiting, missed birthdays and holidays while Daniel wondered why his mother had suddenly disappeared. One lie could have created years of distance, and both of them might have blamed themselves. Daniel seemed to realize the same thing. Mom, he said softly, none of it was true. Maggie looked at him. I know that now. Daniel's face tightened at the last word. Now. Claire heard it too. I made a mistake, she said quickly. Daniel shook his head. A mistake is forgetting a dinner reservation. You built an entire conversation I never had. Claire looked at Maggie, then back at Daniel. What do you want me to say? Daniel answered without hesitation. The truth. For once tonight, stop telling everyone what I think and tell us what you think. Claire looked from Daniel to Maggie, and for the first time that evening, there was nowhere left for her to hide. No borrowed words. No absent husband to speak for. No version of the story she could control once Maggie walked out the door. You want the truth? Claire asked quietly. Daniel nodded. Yes. Claire pressed her lips together. I am jealous. The admission seemed to surprise even her. Maggie did not move. Daniel remained silent, giving his wife room to continue. I am jealous of how easy it is between you two, Claire said. You have one look, one old joke, one story, and suddenly you are both somewhere I cannot follow. I have spent 11 years feeling like I arrived halfway through a movie everyone else already understands. Daniel's expression softened, but his voice stayed steady. Why did you never tell me that? Because it sounds ridiculous. It sounds human, Maggie said. Claire looked at her. Maggie continued, what you did with that feeling tonight is the problem. Claire lowered her eyes. Every Christmas, every birthday, every time Emily asks Daniel about when he was little, there you are. You know the answers. You know the stories. Sometimes I feel like I am renting space inside a family that existed before me. Daniel shook his head slowly. Claire, every family existed before someone joined it. You did not replace Mom when we got married. She did not replace you either. But you always defend her. Tonight I am defending the truth. Claire flinched. Daniel stepped closer, though his tone remained calm. If Mom had crossed a boundary, I would tell her. If she had disrespected you, I would address it. But she did not do those things tonight. You told her I pitied her. You told her I wanted her gone. You told her I would be happier without her. Claire's eyes glistened. I thought if she backed away, maybe we could finally breathe. Daniel stared at her. You could have asked me for more time together. I did. You asked for weekends. We made weekends. You asked for one holiday morning at home. Mom agreed before I even finished explaining. Claire turned toward Maggie, surprised. Maggie nodded. Daniel called me last October. He said you wanted Christmas morning with just the three of you. I told him I thought that was a good idea. Claire looked back at Daniel. You told me your mother was disappointed. Daniel frowned. I said I was disappointed because I liked having everyone together. Mom was the one who told me to stop making it complicated. Silence settled over the room again, but it felt different now. Less like a weapon. More like a mirror. Claire sat slowly in one of the dining chairs. Then maybe I have been fighting something that was never happening. Maggie's voice remained gentle. Maybe. But you still made choices. Claire looked up. I know. Daniel pulled out the chair across from her but did not sit. Being hurt explains what you feel. It does not excuse what you did. Claire nodded faintly. I know that too. Upstairs, another floorboard creaked. All three adults looked toward the ceiling. Daniel lowered his voice immediately. Emily does not need to come downstairs and find us tearing each other apart. Maggie set her purse on the entryway bench again, but she kept her coat in her arms. Then do not. Daniel turned to her. Mom, I am not letting this go. I did not ask you to. I heard what she said to you. So did I. Maggie walked closer to her son. And what happens next belongs to your marriage. Do not turn me into the reason you make a decision tonight that you might regret tomorrow. Claire stared at her. After everything I said, you are defending me? No, Maggie replied. I am refusing to become what you accused me of being. Claire's face fell. Maggie's voice stayed calm. I will not compete with you for Daniel. I will not ask him to punish you to prove that he loves me. And I will not pretend tonight did not happen. Daniel looked at his mother with a mixture of gratitude and sadness. What do you want me to do? Maggie shook her head. That is the question Claire should never have answered for you, and I will not answer it either. Daniel absorbed that. Claire looked down at her hands. Maggie, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, I am sorry. Maggie studied her for a long moment. I believe you are sorry that Daniel heard you. Claire looked up sharply. Maggie did not sound cruel. That made the words heavier. Someday, Maggie continued, I hope you are also sorry for what you were willing to let me believe when you thought he would never know. Claire had no defense left. Daniel reached for his car keys on the small table beside the doorway. Mom, I am taking you home. Maggie started to object. My car is right outside. I know. We can come back for it tomorrow. Claire stood. Daniel, are you leaving? He looked at her, then toward the stairs where their daughter remained upstairs. I am taking my mother home. Then I am coming back, and you and I are going to have the conversation we should have had a long time ago. Claire swallowed. About us? Daniel nodded. About all of us. But this time, nobody gets to speak for anyone else. Daniel opened the front door, and the cool evening air entered the house again. Maggie stepped onto the porch beside him, then stopped. Behind them, Claire stood several feet inside the entryway, looking smaller somehow than she had 20 minutes earlier. The confidence was gone. What remained was a woman forced to stand beside the consequences of words she had believed would never be challenged. Daniel, Claire said softly. He turned. Are you choosing her over me? Maggie closed her eyes for a moment. It was exactly the question she had hoped Claire would not ask. Daniel looked at his wife for several seconds before answering. No. Tonight, I am choosing not to pretend I did not see who you became when you thought I was not watching. Claire's face tightened. That is not fair. Neither was telling my mother that I wanted her out of my life. His voice never rose. I am coming back. We will talk. We will decide what needs to change. But I am not going to stand here and make promises while I am still trying to understand what I heard. Claire looked toward Maggie. I really am sorry. Maggie nodded once. Then let that apology become something tomorrow that it cannot become tonight. Claire seemed confused. What does that mean? It means regret is a feeling. Change is what you do after the feeling passes. Maggie stepped off the porch with Daniel beside her. Neither of them spoke until they reached his car in the driveway. Daniel unlocked the passenger door, but Maggie remained standing beside it. Her own car was still parked along the curb under the maple tree. You do not have to drive me, she said. I know. And you do not have to stay with me tonight. I know that too. Maggie studied her son. Beneath the disappointment in his face, she could see the boy he had once been, the young man who always believed every problem had to be solved before he could sleep. Daniel, listen to me carefully. Do not end your marriage tonight because you think that would prove something to me. He looked toward the house. Mom, she lied about me. She used my name to hurt you. Yes. How am I supposed to walk back in there and forget that? You are not. Maggie touched his arm gently. Forgiveness and forgetting are not the same thing. Neither is accountability and revenge. Daniel looked down at the car keys in his hand. I keep thinking about what would have happened if I had stayed outside 5 minutes longer. Maggie had been thinking about it too. She pictured herself driving home alone, replaying Claire's words at every stoplight. Daniel is exhausted by you. Daniel invites you because he feels sorry for you. Daniel would be happier if you disappeared. Even knowing her son as well as she did, repetition could have planted doubt. She might have stopped calling to protect him. Daniel might have interpreted her distance as anger. Emily might have seen less of her grandmother without understanding why. A family could fracture without anyone knowing where the first crack had begun. But you came back inside, Maggie said. And now we know. Daniel looked at her. How did you stay so calm? Maggie gave him a tired smile. Because I saw you behind her. Before she said all of that. Almost from the beginning. Daniel stared at her. You knew I was there, and you let her keep talking. I did not make her say anything. I gave her the opportunity to stop. Daniel slowly understood. That is why you kept looking at me. Maggie nodded. I needed to know whether she was angry or whether she was willing to lie. There is a difference. Daniel glanced back at the house. Through the front window, Claire was still standing in the entryway. What if we cannot fix this? He asked. Then you will face that honestly. But you have a daughter upstairs who loves both of you. Whatever happens next should be thoughtful, not theatrical. Daniel gave a quiet breath that almost became a laugh. You are still protecting everybody. No, Maggie said. I am protecting the truth from becoming another weapon. Daniel opened the passenger door again. This time Maggie got in. During the 15-minute drive to her house, they spoke very little. Streetlights passed across the windshield in steady intervals, and the silence between them felt different from the silence at dinner. There was no deception inside it. When they reached Maggie's small brick home, Daniel walked her to the porch. Mom, he said before she unlocked the door. I never invited you anywhere because I felt sorry for you. Maggie turned toward him. I know. And I have never wanted you out of my life. I know that too. Daniel hesitated. I should have noticed Claire was struggling. Maggie shook her head. You can take responsibility for what you missed. Do not take responsibility for choices someone else made. Daniel nodded slowly. Maggie unlocked the door, then looked back at him. Go home to your wife. Listen before you decide. Speak for yourself. Make her do the same. Daniel managed a small smile. You make that sound simple. Simple and easy are not the same thing. He hugged her gently, then turned toward the driveway. Maggie watched until his car disappeared around the corner. Only then did she step inside and close the door. She had been told to leave a family that someone else believed they could define without her. Yet she did not return home defeated. She returned knowing something far more important. Daniel had not rescued her. He had witnessed the truth, and Maggie had refused to turn that truth into revenge. Because respect is not proven by how people treat one another when everyone is watching. Character reveals itself in the quiet moments, when someone believes there will be no witness, no consequence, and no one standing behind them to hear the words they thought they could take back.